What just happened?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Saturday, September 21st, 2024. Welcome into this live postcast edition of the Locked On Tar Heels podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome in all you everydayers, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, which was a wild place to be this afternoon. And of course, all our Locked On Tar Heels insiders as well. So glad that you're all here. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Well, look, we never dodge the smoke. We're always going to come and talk afterwards. And thankfully, it's kind of fitting that we had some time between the end of the game and when I'm able to do this. I apologize for the tardiness. My family was doing like a service day with one of the ministries my wife works with at our church. And so I guess the good news is it gave some space to everybody kind of catch their breath, let all the Mack Brown dust clear, and kind of figure out where stuff was at. So look, this legitimately was a weird and tough day for me. Obviously, the Carolina of it all. This happens, right? But my Braves, you all know I'm a big Braves fan. They're not going to make the playoffs, all these injuries. And so with all of this going on, y'all, this is wild. All day long, I'm getting texts from the other Locked On hosts. They're DMing in our host chat, like, oh boy, wellness check on Isaac Shade, all this kind of stuff. Somebody's like, that postcast is going to be crazy and unhinged. So here we are trying to figure out our life and if we're all okay. Are you all okay? I think I'm okay, but I don't know. So here's what we're going to do. If you're just joining us for the first time on a live postcast, what we do is just start unpacking the football game, the takeaways from the day of, what we learned, what we saw, all sorts of stuff like that, successes, failures. And then always one of the great things about doing these live is that there's always some good questions and observations from all of you in the live chat feature. So if you've got questions or observations, drop them in there and we will get those later in the show. So here's where we're going to start today. Before we just before we get to any of that, let's talk about Mack Brown, because that was almost a bigger crazy storyline than the game itself, because from the end of the game until about, multiple hours later, nobody knew what was happening with Mack Brown, because it kind of sounded like and seemed like maybe he had quit or retired or resigned or something after the game. So it seems like it was just, in the end, one of those typical Mack Brown impassioned speeches where he's basically saying, look, if I'm letting us down, I'm failing us, then I need to go. It's my time. I'll see myself out and somebody else can do it, right? It's basically that. And players come to his aid and say, look, we're out there not executing. It's not all on you. And Coach Brown is like, yeah, but I hired everybody and I recruited all of you guys and signed you. There's all that. But Mack Brown is not retiring. He's not quitting. He's not stepping away. Just know that is where we're at right now. In fact, this was the best summary of it, of the actual truth of the matter. Chris Lowe, who works for ESPN, tweeted, quote, Mack Brown told ESPN on Saturday he's not resigning and will be back at work Sunday following an embarrassing 70-50 loss to James Madison. He said it was an emotional locker room and told the team he blamed himself and would step away if he couldn't get things straightened out, end quote. And so that's the thing. Gonna have to figure out how to get things straightened out. Will they be able to? We don't know. And that's the thing, is we won't find that out till next Saturday when, all of a sudden here comes now ACC play. Congratulations. And interestingly, you probably saw this as well. Mack Brown was the only person that spoke to the media after the game at the press conference. No players were made available. And so that's what that is. But Mack Brown is not going anywhere right now. All right, now the game. I am dumbfounded at this result. I think we all knew that James Madison was a very good and very strong team, and that they certainly could beat Carolina. That alone is not a shock to me. But the way it happened, I'm literally at a loss for words about it, because that was unlike anything I have seen. That first half was one of the wackiest 30 minutes of football these two eyeballs have ever laid eyes on. North Carolina was down by 32 points at halftime. North Carolina had 5 turnovers in this game, 3 lost fumbles and 2 interceptions, and all of the special teams miscues and things as well. And James Madison, who scored 70 points, has been doing nothing prior to this. I can't remember specifically, but I think it was like last week against Gardner-Webb. I think they scored 13 points, if I'm remembering correctly. Let me quickly get to it and see if I can find their game log from this year. Yeah, Charlotte, week 1, they scored, I can't find it, not many points, right? I mean, it's just, oh, there we go. They scored 30 in week 1 against Charlotte. But then last week against Gardner-Webb, just 13 points. And then they put up 70 on North Carolina. Now, it's also wacky because they had not been giving up points. They had only given up 13 total points. And Carolina drops 50. I mean, this is just absolutely out of some kind of horror story. Incredible stuff. Alonzo Barnett III, 388 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 13 carries for 99 yards, and 2 more on the ground. That's 7 total touchdowns he was responsible for. Of JMU's 70 points, 53 were in the first half. That 70 points ties the record for the most points Carolina has ever given up. And it's so crazy because, like, we talked about it this week, right? You heard me say multiple times. Look, James Madison is very App Statey in how we should look and think about this, as not all teams not at the Power 4 level are created equal. This was a much better team than what we had seen last week at Central or the week before with Charlotte, and you had to buckle up and be ready. And I said it was going to be like App State the past couple years, but I didn't know just how spot on that was going to be. And here's what I mean by that. 2 years ago against App State, Carolina wins 63-61, 124 points total scored. Last year, Carolina beats App State 40-34, 74 total points scored. And obviously on Saturday, 70-50, James Madison, 120 points scored. So, oh, by the way, if Carolina's playing a Sunbelt school again, you might want to take the over, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, this is nuts. That's an average total score of these last 3 games against the Sunbelt team of 106 total points. And that 124 points that Carolina and App scored 2 years ago was the most total combined points in a Carolina game ever. Today, against James Madison, the second most. And then, of course, let's not forget that there's all of this wackiness afoot. And all of that is with prize #1 recruit in the country, AJ Dubbanza, in town on his official visit. And Carolina's trying to, like, make things look good for him. And this happens. So I couldn't help it. I just tweeted out, man, I hope AJ Dubbanza doesn't care about football, because yikes, right? So anyway, there we go. There it is. We're going to keep talking, but I mean, it's just a big ball of wacky. That's what we saw on Saturday afternoon. I don't want to go too long, though, without getting to at least one happy, positive thing, and that is this, a silver lining. The Tar Heels have their quarterback, and it's Jacolby Criswell. It was not a perfect game, and it shouldn't have been. I mean, this is his first game as the starter, but he was 28 of 48, about 58%, 475 passing yards. That is the 3rd most in a single game in Carolina history, and more than Drake May ever had. 3 touchdowns. Obviously, we already mentioned the 2 interceptions. So again, everything wasn't perfect. His touch wasn't always on. Missed some throws here and there, but The arm strength is there. The ball looks pretty coming out of his hand. And he's doing all that, oh, by the way, while he's running around a good bit in this game. I mean, James Madison was blitzing from all sorts of unconventional spots, making life really, really difficult on him. And so that is the silver lining, is Jacolby Criswell's your guy. You got that, and you can, I feel like now definitively, and I expect this is what the staff will say, definitively, Jacolby Criswell's our guy. Connor Harrell's the backup. I expect that or designation to be taken away from the depth chart this week, where it's Jacolby Criswell and then Connor Harrell. And so that's good news to me as you head to Duke next week. And then the last thing before we take our first break here is that Omarion Hampton just keeps being Omarion Hampton. He was bottled up quite a bit early, but as he keeps going, he's going to get going and he's going to do work. 139 yards on the ground on just 19 carries, 3 more touchdowns, just like last week, which is kind of funny because remember the first 2 games of the season, Minnesota, Charlotte, 0 touchdowns for Omarion Hampton, and then he's racked up 6 in the past 2 weeks, on his way now to scoring a whole bunch of touchdowns this year, as you expect. And his individual numbers continue to be exactly what you're looking for out of him. And also in this game, added 3 receptions for 34 yards. You want him involved in the passing game as well. Much more to talk on, including, hey, we were looking for a fast start in this game. Did we get it? Well, from one of the teams we did, but it was the wrong team. We'll talk about that and much more coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, as we get back, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our box score from this game so that those of you watching on YouTube can see that in real time. If you're listening back to the podcast on your audio podcast feed, what's up to you? Welcome in. Glad you're here. You're just going to have to pull the box score up and or listen to me as we talk about things, but I just want to make it available. So in yesterday's show with Denoris Searcy, in our What to Watch For, the first thing that Searce talked about was that he needed a fast start from Carolina. There was a fast start, but it was not from Carolina. It was from James Madison. Here's how this thing started off. Literally the first play of the game after the opening kick. First play from scrimmage, how about that? Was a very inauspicious start because JMU's quarterback, man, just has that keeper, scrambles around the left end, off to the races. And man, if that wasn't already your sign right there that like this is not going to be the best day we've ever had, then it was going to be. So they get that. Thankfully, Carolina was able to slow him down, keep him to 3. It was a big old boom. It was like a 50-yarder to kick off the game. But then I'm like, okay, so now Carolina just needs to get going, go get 7 and take the lead and then run away with it. Man, first play of the game, beautiful pass from Criswell to Christian Hamilton, plus a roughing the passer tacked onto it. And it's like, whoo, baby, here we go. We're cooking. We're ready. Short little gain from Omarion Hampton, and then another first down to Christian Hamilton, but he fumbles. It's like, oh, man. Carolina just couldn't get out of their own way. And again, it was from the very beginning of this thing. This fast start you were looking for wanted to peek through, but it just never could. But thankfully, Carolina held James Madison to 3 and out. They had to punt right there. But then Carolina had to punt, and the punt was blocked. And then it was a scoop and score. Just all that. Then they go for 2. So that fast start that you were looking for, it just wasn't there. Carolina continues to not be able to start hot out of the gates. But here's the thing. Even with all that, Carolina gets down 11-0, and people in our Discord started freaking out. And I was like, y'all, you got to chill. Just Carolina just needs to settle into the game. Emotions are going. James Madison's getting some tricky things going on. Just nothing to worry about. And that was correct. Heels got right back in it. In fact, scored 14 straight points and took a lead. And you're thinking, oh, man, everything is now going to settle in fine. We're going to be in great shape from here. Nothing at all to worry about that. But then after that, James Madison just starts rolling. And Carolina cannot stop it. And next thing you know, you're down 32 at the half. So there you go. That fast start, no. Another one of our what to watch for points for this game was that Carolina needed to get the wide receivers going. One of the thoughts that Denoris and I both had about it was that with Jacolby Criswell as the starting quarterback, you feel better about that capability to get the wide receivers going. The tight ends, we acknowledged, already were, and they had another solid day. On Saturday, Bryson Nesbitt, 4 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. John Copenhaver, 3 catches for 62 yards and a touchdown. Nice little scamper down the sideline there for Copenhaver to score. And so tight ends kept going. And here's the thing. There was no wide receiver that it was just a blow up crazy game kind of game, but there was nice variety. Criswell spread the ball around, and lots of guys had catches in addition to Nesbitt and Copenhaver. I had said on the show yesterday that J.J. Jones, I was looking for like 7 receptions for 110 yards. Didn't quite get there, but he did have 5 catches for 86. Getting close to what you're looking for. Kobe Paysour had 4 targets, caught every one of them for 93 yards. In totality, 8 different players caught at least 2 passes in this game, 6 of which were wide receivers. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. Really encouraged to see that happening. Although that said, fans, quote unquote fans, are getting after these guys after the game. And JJ Jones starts chirping back on Twitter. And I'm like, JJ, buddy, just don't. It's not going to help yourself in any way. Just turn off social media after a day like this. And it's just not going to be worth it. But was so glad to see at least the wide receivers start to get going a little bit. Next thing that we were watching for, or another one of our what to watch for points, was the penalties. Remember last week, against Central Carolina, penalized, had 16 penalties, although it was really 17 because of the kickoff going out of bounds. It was better on Saturday, but still 9 penalties for 76 yards, plus another one that it would have been 10, but it was offsetting penalties, so it didn't matter. Now, again, similar to last week, there were some questionable calls. There was a roughing the passer called on Carolina that I as unbiasedly as I can say it and think about it and talk about it, it was soft, man. Boy, it was soft. And I legitimately did not think it was a roughing the passer. So step back in the right direction. But again, remember, just 3 penalties for Carolina in week 1 against Minnesota. Let's get it back down, closer out of that double-digit range, back down towards 5. Those are the numbers you can kind of live with that. Another thing we were watching for, a key matchup, was Carolina's rush defense and how it was could it stack up? And this was the first time that there was a quarterback threat, not through the air. I had said you got to make Barnett beat you through the air. And he did in a big way, unfortunately. But also, I was concerned because of his legs and that of George Pettaway, and that combination was concerning for me. But we were looking at this rush defense, maybe they can keep going. Maybe they can keep doing things really well on the ground, to which they had not allowed an entire team to get 100 yards or more this season. Seriously, none of the 3 previous teams. Let me look at the game log for it. Let me pull it back up really quick here. Rushing defense had allowed 79 yards to Minnesota, 49 yards to Charlotte, and 76 yards to Central. Here was the problem on Saturday. Both quarterback Barnett and George Pettaway individually had more yards than Carolina had given up to any single team in a single game this year. They both eclipsed what the previous high was. Minnesota as a team had 79 rush yards. That was the most Carolina had given up. Petaway eclipsed that by himself. Barnett eclipsed that by himself. And as a team in this game, James Madison racked up 223 rushing yards. You just can't do that. But when Barnett's carving up the secondary as well, of course all that running is going to be open, and it's just what it is. So that's where we are. Those are some of the highlights, or main things to talk about anyway. I guess we'd call them lowlights. All of that said, there's certainly more to talk about, but here's where it brings us. Now, if you're North Carolina, you have to stop and completely regroup. You have to say to yourself, look, we did this and it was an absolute dumpster fire. There's no other way to say it. And, people talking about this as the most embarrassing game they've ever seen. And, all those sorts of things. And I get it. I hear that. But this is how you do sports. You just say, all right, that was embarrassing, but we got to either just burn the tape and never watch it, or watch it intently and learn everything we can about how we screwed up and how we got to get better moving forward. I think of Notre Dame, who got embarrassed, different score, but also embarrassed by Northern Illinois at home, 16-14. What did they do the next week? They went out and slaughtered Purdue, 66-7 the very next week. Well, Carolina also playing an in-state team next week, just like Notre Dame did with Purdue. The Tar Heels go to Duke, and they have an opportunity to put their head down and say, all right, who are we going to be as a football team? How are we going to be challenged by our coaches? How are we going to show up and make stuff happen? And look, we should recognize, I haven't said this yet, James Madison is coming off a bye. I mean, there's something to that. And that's where you probably part of why you start seeing all those, the onside and the going for two early and things of that nature. But if you're the Tar Heels, I mean, it's a look yourself in the mirror sort of week. Who are we? Am I putting in everything I need to? Why did I not make this play? How did I miss that assignment? Am I being accountable to my brothers? Am I getting every rep in? The coaching staff, same thing. Got to look themselves in the face and one another in the face and be brutally honest. Look themselves in the mirror and be brutally honest. Is there something schematically that is inherently flawed? Is there something in our training or our prep that's inherently flawed, that's stopping us from getting the start we need, or something of that nature? And then you figure that out and you fix it this week. Because if not, it is going to be a very long ACC season. Because since it's been 4 non-con games to start, it's all ACC from here on out the rest of the season. And if it's more performances like it was on Saturday, basketball can't come soon enough. But if you use this as a turning point, a fork in the road, to do exactly what Notre Dame did when they played Purdue the very next week, and say, all right, that's sports. It happened. We learn from it. We move on. And we don't let one loss turn into 2 and 3 and 4. You can do that. That's the beauty of sports. Literally next week, you can turn around and become 1-0 in the ACC and have everything you want to play for in terms of ACC success. I know the last couple of years, Carolina has choked down the stretch of the season. Maybe today was that choke, and you put it behind you, and you got a whole bunch of games left to try to figure out how to remedy that. Is that going to happen? We don't know yet. We're going to have to wait and find out. But what I want to do now is get to the comments, because I know we got some great comments and questions and thoughts from you guys, and I want to hear what you have to say and respond to those in real time. And we'll do that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about our good friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Pretty cool thing that's going on there with FanDuel. You'll get started, check this out, with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So make sure you go check out all the great lines that are going on tomorrow for Sunday and dive in on that. If you want to go check it out, once again, that is FanDuel.com. All right, as we continue talking, I'm actually going to leave the box score up, but I am going to go ahead and pull up the live comments. What is up? T-Man, our buddy from Discord, says, dude, I saw something that said Mack was retiring, and I was like, no way. Yeah, T-Man, I saw that in the Discord. I hadn't had a chance to respond to it yet, but that's correct. No, again, if you're late joining us, Mack Brown is not going anywhere. That has been confirmed and all of that. So just be ready for it. Tony Dow, what's up, Tony? Tony says, how did James Madison totally reboot after last year and then come into Keenan and smoke the Heels? Evidently, it comes down to coaching, and we obviously didn't coach. Several things here, Tony and others. First off, kudos to James Madison, as Tony says. They have totally rebooted because, as a reminder, their coach, who had been very successful. This is just James Madison's third year at the FBS level. They had been an FCS powerhouse, and they've been really strong in their 2 years at the FBS level. He took off for Indiana this year and took a bunch of their talent with him. And so, to be honest, looking at James Madison's first 2 games against Charlotte and Gardner-Webb, I was like, I mean, you went 2-0, but not much there, not much. Haven't let them score, but haven't really had all that ton of offense. Feel good. And not in a trap game overlooking them sort of way, but in a they've been proud and they've done well, but you should win this game. But they have retooled. I think Barnett was a huge factor in that thing. I think it was one of those, like we see this in Carolina basketball all the time, a guy that isn't recruited by the Carolina basketball team comes in and is like, you didn't come after me, so I'm going to light you up now. And he did. I mean, what a game from this young man. I mean, tip your hat to him. That was a very, very well-managed game by Byron. I mean, just carving up Carolina with his legs and with his arm. And to the coaching, Tony, that certainly plays a factor, but there is an execution factor as well. The lack of communication on the back end, just fumbles, dropping balls, things like that with players who it's not a lack of talent. It's an execution thing. So, Tony, I think it is a give and take of where the coaches, and Coach Brown obviously is taking on a lot of this and pointing at himself and saying all that. But I also, in the same breath, want to remind myself and all of us that Carolina with Mack Brown, there just isn't and hasn't been, to this point in Carolina history, a coach that is doing everything he is. Now, does that mean the coaching was perfect? No. Are there things to figure out? Absolutely. And that's the thing. So, Tony, your question is great. How did JMU reboot so well? But they've done it, and they showed up today. Will Hager, what's up? Will says, what would you predict our regular season record to be after this game in the whole non-con schedule? Honestly, can't personally confidently predict better than 3-9 after today. Let me pull the schedule back up. Obviously, Carolina is 3-1 right now. Let me walk our way through the rest of the regular season. At Duke versus Pitt versus Georgia Tech, at Virginia, at Florida State, hosting Wake, at BC, hosting NC State. So of those, I think Duke's a tall task next week. It's another athletic quarterback that can take care of business. After what I saw today, I'd have to take Duke. I mean, gosh, Duke, Pitt, Georgia Tech. Carolina could legitimately go 0-3 in these next couple weeks. Pitt's been looking good. Obviously, Georgia Tech has had some back and forth things, but they've been solid, and we know the Georgia Tech struggles. I'm going to say, though, because 2 of those games are at home, and 1 is just at Duke. So give me Carolina 2-1 in those games, taking them to 5-2. Then you're at Virginia. I'm still going to say winning that one, 6-2. Let's say a loss at Florida State. I know they suck, but it's just so hard. And I think they're going to have a lot of things figured out last year, or when we get there, kind of similar to Clemson last year. So going to be 6-3, beat Wake. They're not good. 7-3. And then you're at BC, man. I think that's going to be a tough game. That's November 23rd, the Saturday before Thanksgiving. I actually think Carolina might drop that one. Give me 7-4. And then NC State, I mean, they're frankly, the only thing that stops us from quite the level of embarrassment today is what happened to NC State. I'm going to say we finally beat the Wolfpack. So give me, what would that be? 8-4 regular season for Carolina, which is wholly on the other side of Will. And look, it might be glass half full, but you all know that's me. I am typically going to look at the bright side of things. And so maybe a more realistic view would be 7-5 or 6-6. But I legitimately think Carolina can regroup and turn this back around. But Will, there is a world where that's a very possible reality if things don't get put into action. Obviously, there's a lot of comments about what a new coach would look like from Salim here. Salim Ahmad says, UNC needs a young coach who can recruit on both sides, not just offensive players. Mack needs to retire. This was embarrassing. Salim and others who would feel the same here. Look, that time is coming, whether it's after this year, whether it's another 2 or 3 years. I just don't think Coach Brown's going to stick around too terribly much longer. But the question continues to be, who is that coach going to be? And I think Salim is right about here is, if this was Carolina basketball, you can go out and get an older and established coach with a great pedigree. I think, and depending on what numbers look like, that's clearly a factor in it of what Carolina is willing to pay, because maybe it's like, hey, we want to go all in on the football program. That's a different thing. But given the track record and history, I think getting a young coach who's up and coming could be a very strong possibility and option, unless the Tar Heels also feel like someone internal who's already on staff is their guy. In which case, sure, do that. But I hear where you're at with that, Salim, and others who would voice that same opinion, that when Coach Brown does decide to walk away, I think that's probably the right route to go. All right, let's keep trucking here through our comments. Jim Holland, what's up, Jim? Says, Isaac, is Matt gone before the season's over or after? I would say after. I don't think it'll happen in season. Of course, could be wrong. That's just my gut. And I know that's weird to say after all of the events of today. I truly do not believe that Mack Brown, let me say it this way, because on one hand, I could see him saying, I'm no good for this team right now. I got to walk away. But I think Mack Brown also has the years of wisdom and experience to say, but it would also be worse for me to walk away in season. And I think that's what it is. I think if he thought he was done and just couldn't do it, I think he would recognize the necessity of the consistency of him finishing out a year before he moves on. All right. Yeah, T-Man says, Isaac, do you have any thoughts on the JJ Jones tweet? Do you think it had to do with what Mack told them about selling down? Look, I said it earlier. We won't go into the tweet because a couple players were tweeting after the game. I do just want to say, though, I understand, like, young men, and you're going to see things and you're going to respond. I would say, like, fellas, if I'm Coach Brown in the locker room after the game, do not go look at social media tonight, because you're just going to get upset and you're just going to respond. That said, man, I know, especially now more than ever, these guys are more like professionals because they're getting paid to do this through the NIL side of things. But still, man, it's not helpful to be like railing at players on social media. It just is not a wise thing. And so, man, it is what it is. Couple Jeff Collins questions. I think we need a bigger sample size. I think today is something of a one-off that's got to do it. Oh man. T-Man says Kobe Paysour is the X factor for our offense, in my opinion. Part of the reason Kobe had some good burn early was Nate McCollum was out of this game, missing another one. And it was weird though. Criswell found Pesor 3 times, pretty quick succession early, and then only one more target the rest of the game. And so, T-Man, I think there's something there of finding more opportunities to get Kobe involved. This poor guy's just been so in and out with injuries and stuff, but I think he really is a talented young talented player. So there is something that Jim Holland said Isaac is really our football therapist in disguise. I forgot to say off the top, for those of you who are new this season, whenever we lose and we hop into our live postcast, whether it's football or basketball, I always say we're going to have a therapy session. So that's what we're doing here tonight, y'all. Therapy session as we get ready to put ourselves to bed on a Saturday night. Anything else? Yeah, I mean, Tony, looking at the bright side with me here. Hey, I look at people getting on the glass half full. Tony says, look, I guess it could be worse. FSU is 1-3. Did they win? Did they beat who are they playing tonight? Cal? Was it Cal? SMU? I'm trying to remember now in real time. And what was the score? Let's look it up. Florida State. Big win. 14-9 for the Noles. I mean, sheesh. Wow. 14-9. Hey, look, FSU finally got a win. Way to go, Noles, I guess, right? Like, wow, what is happening? Anyway, there you go. All right, gang. That's probably good enough for tonight. It's getting late. You all need to go to bed. I need to go to bed. I got to lead some songs at children's church tomorrow. So I got to go learn all the motions for that. So I got to do that tonight here on Saturday evening. Thank you so much for you night owls, you crazies, for staying up with me even after a loss. But it's good to have a therapy session together and work through all of this together as a Locked On Tar Heels family. Always good to be together, even when it's tough, right, man? Those are good times and meaningful moments. So we will be right back together on Monday's show. I don't know if we'll have any news from the AJ DeBanza visit yet or not, but we'll have several things to talk about, including our weekend whip around, if there's anything else coming out of the football game, and so much more. As a reminder, the ACC schedule drops on Tuesday evening. So guess what? Pat Kilby and I are going live right after that to record Wednesday's show. But we just thought, man, it'd be fun to all hop in live together on Tuesday evening. So make sure you are geared up for that. All right, guys, even on a kind of day, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back together on Monday. But until then, peace.